Hey guys, welcome back. So with continuing our coverage of Ultimate Spider-Man, is here where we're shown basically two sides of the same coin. Because with Peter and Harry being captured by Kraven, there's a couple moments here where we see sides of Peter that we haven't seen before. And it's very telling, because on the other side of that coin, with the Pico suit being a perfect replica of Peter's psyche, this tells us when we learn more about Peter, we learn more about the suit. And as some would say, you really find out who a person is when they're hunted. So with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so for this one we come back in January, and January 31st to be more specific, and as we know from what we saw in the December issue, the Christmas issue, Peter and Harry are still missing. But even with that being the case, we've still got a Spider-Man swinging around New York, which on one hand, part of this has to do with what we discovered about Peter's Pico suit that had been posing as Peter since he went missing, which MJ discovered on Christmas not long after she found out that Harry was missing too. So now with us seeing Spider-Man out and about and us knowing that it's not Peter, at first you might guess that this is just the Pico suit posing as Spider-Man as well, but no, because someone's actually in this suit, and that someone is Peter's son, Richard Parker. And it's a pretty crazy thing to see, because ever since Peter had more or less benched the Pico suit, it's been showing signs of either wanting to get back to Peter, or even at times expressing its affections for Peter's family. And not in a weird way, I'm more so referring to like in August, when the suit told Peter to tell the kids happy birthday. And because the suit is, as it would describe, a perfect replica of Peter's psyche, housed in a totally independent, completely adaptable Pico shell, there's a sentient side to this thing that's showing traits very similar to Peter, and that's causing me to have some concerns. Cause seeing Richard with the suit, this just reminds me of how this whole superpowered change in Peter's life just ended up bringing him and May a lot closer. And I don't know if closer is really the best way to describe it, but it created something special between the two of them. Because when May found out, this opened the opportunity for her to get involved with how the suit would look. And for a brief moment, it was like, okay, hey, this is our little secret. So now with Richard using the suit and this being their little secret, for me, this is starting to raise some concerns. Because Peter's psyche is complex. There's a dark side to it. And we get a couple of examples that we'll talk about in a little bit. But in the here and now with Richard using the suit, he has quite the rough landing. And the suit lets him know here that his dad landed in a dumpster the first time he took it for a spin. So that's not too bad for Richard, given the fact that he doesn't even have powers. And also with the suit making itself look like Peter here, Richard tells it that freaks him out. So the suit just blacks out its eyes and it's like, is that better? And Richard's just like, nah, somehow you made it worse. So eventually it goes for a blacked out version of Peter and May's final design, which you could also look at as like the original black version of the suit, just with the spider logo and the web pattern now. But halfway through this conversion, I gotta say, this look that the Pico suit has with the red on the inside, it's very Venom-esque if you ask me, and it really just seems like one of those seeds that Hickman throws in, so that later when things pop off, it's not like it happened out the blue. But Richard goes on to tell the Pico suit here that he'd rather it not pretend that it's Peter or his dad when it's just the two of them. Because for a moment here, Richard's also like he can kind of understand how his mom might, and then he just stops right there like, wait a minute, you and my mom aren't doing anything like, you know. And the suit's like, whoa, I'm not that kind of accessory. And I mean, I could be. Wait, let me stop. Okay, he didn't say any of that. And I'm not sure why this is reminding me of when the Pico suit said, oh, I can do all kinds of things, Peter. But no, the Pico suit tells Richard here, your dad was very clear. He gave me 3 rules if something ever happened to him. 1, no touching Mary Jane. 2, protect the family, no matter what. And 3, no touching Mary Jane. You know, I always felt like it's a very dangerous thing when you give an artificial life form certain instructions, because telling it to protect the family no matter what, that's a very broad instruction. And just depending on how the Pico suit interprets it, that can get really messy really quick. And then the no touching Mary Jane thing. What if she's about to fall off a building? You can't touch her, and you gotta protect her no matter what. And I mean, I'm sure it's not a literal no touching thing, but I think you guys kind of get where I'm going with this. But nonetheless, this leads to Richard expressing that he's worried about his dad. So he asks the suit if it thinks he's okay, and it tells him, what I know is that your dad's a fighter. He'll get up from whatever's knocked him down. And if it was worse than that, if he was gone, I would know that too. So of course Richard's like, how? And the suit tells him, not sure, I just do. And when Richard asks if it can sense him, the suit tells him, I don't understand it, but yes. Which right there is a really interesting thing that just gets brushed over here. because with us now knowing that this suit has some sort of connection to Peter that goes beyond even its understanding, this opens a floodgate of possibilities, because in a similar way to how a symbiote would contain certain properties from his former host, which for the most part with the Pico suit, it has Peter's psyche copied over to it. But on top of that, I have this lingering suspicion of it being something much deeper, like perhaps Peter's connection to being a spider totem, or even something similar to what we've seen going on with Black Panther in this same universe, and the whole mystery of sentient vibranium. But as it stands, we don't know what the Pico suit is made out of, so I won't exactly jump into the sentient vibranium wormhole, at least not in this video. But I do believe the concept of this connection, it's gonna come back in a huge way later on. And the concept of this suit being a copy of Peter's psyche and having this mysterious connection to him, these are a couple things that we gotta keep an eye on. Because as it stands, we know that this mysterious connection isn't a thing of science or technology for that matter, because the suit goes on to tell Richard that it suggested that to Peter at one point, because a few months back it told Peter if he wanted, it can inject the traits of itself into Peter's bloodstream, and that way it would always be able to find him. And it told Peter that it could do the same for MJ and the kids, but Peter turned it down, which totally makes sense because Peter was just protecting his family. But now that he's missing, Richard's just like, well, I bet he'd change his mind about that now. So the suit just tells him as soon as his dad gets back, we'll just have to ask him. And following this, it's here where we head over to Kraven, who's currently in the kingdom of the Mole Man below Staten Island, which is also the savage land of Earth 6160, which is wild to see. But as it turns out, Kraven's recently let the Mole Man know that he's captured both Spider-Man and the Green Goblin. And it causes a bit of tension on the Mole Man's part because the Kingpin wanted them brought to him. And we've already seen the Kingpin get pissed off back in issue 11 when Martin Lee just let Spider-Man go, because that whole Sinister Six meeting led to Wilson Fisk catching a bit of a temper and more or less telling them to put their plans and agendas to the side and make bringing in Spider-Man and the Green Goblin a priority. But apparently Kraven is just like, my plans and agendas are immovable. They step aside for no one. Because basically he wants to bring Peter and Harry here and use the Mole Man's territory as his hunting ground, which is literally a whole side mission away from what Wilson Fisk had requested. And that's what has the Mole Man nervous, because he's like, hey, now you're pulling me into this. But what Kraven says here about having Peter and Harry captive, he says, I've had them long enough to break them down, drug them, beat them, learn their strengths, relish in their weaknesses. You and the others will simply have to endure my indiscretions. I tell you, friend, I anticipate this being my greatest hunt. And you know, I can't help but to think, when it comes down to the members of the Sinister Six, and more specifically this world's Sinister Six, for one, if Kraven had not been able to track down Peter and Harry, I'd have just been like, man, don't even call yourself Kraven the Hunter no more, because you should be the first person who could track these guys down. And secondly, I couldn't imagine a scenario where he wouldn't try to make some game of it. Because regardless of who Kraven's with or what the instructions are, I'd imagine that he would still do his own thing, or at the least carry out whatever instructions his own way. So I'm glad that we're seeing that here. But either way, Mole Man goes on to say, do what you will, I don't care, not one bit. But this is you dragging me into your schemes, making me part of your plans, for you want to do the deed in my territory and make the Mole Man complicit in your acts. So Kraven goes on to explain why he needs his hunt to happen here. And there's a moment where he says, I'm not a recreational hunter claiming trophies on the weekend. I am a true predator, and the hunt must be pure. The hunt must be a real risk. The prey must be free, and the environment not just to my advantage. Because for Kraven, it wouldn't be much of a hunt, or a challenge at that, if he were to rig the odds in his favor. And Kraven's all about pursuing that ultimate challenge, whether that be the game that he's choosing to hunt or the conditions of where that hunt takes place. And that's why to him, this hunt must happen here. So the Mole Man tells him like, hey, I'm not sure you truly understand what you're asking, Kraven. This is not a soft land. It is a savage one. And I can only imagine when Kraven first saw this place, he's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna hunt here one day. But he goes on to tell the Mole Man, yes, I can see that. The creatures you have down here are remarkable. They are from a better time, when the world was simple and motivations were pure. Live or die, kill or be killed, as we see what appears to be Sauron chilling next to a T-Rex. And I mean, I don't know if that's him. But Kraven goes on to say this place is truly a testing ground. It is perfection, but at the same time, at the end of the day, it belongs to the Mole Man. So he has the final say. But in the middle of them going back and forth, Mysterio pops up like, ooh, y'all down here keeping secrets? Kingpin gonna be mad when he hear about this. And this has Kraven looking at Mole Man like, hey, I told you to meet in secret. And they start going back and forth trying to figure out how Mysterio even found out. and they're basically blaming each other, but Mysterio just tells them that neither of them are to blame, because he simply just comes and goes as he pleases, whenever, wherever. And by no means is he trying to stop this from happening, and in fact he tells Kraven, I want to see him. And he even looks over at Mole Man like, don't you? And Mole Man takes a second before he's like, yes. So Kraven takes them up to the surface where he has Peter and Harry, and at first Mysterio's like, I assume you have them sedated. So Kraven tells them I did at first, before I got to know them. Then there were other drugs to learn their hidden secrets and their greater truths. And of course the occasional bout of physical domination, necessary in these captive situations. But now I've come up with something more effective. And that's when we see that Kraven has them wearing bomb collars, which right away had me thinking of that old movie Deadlock, because it had this prison where they gave everyone collars that were randomly paired to different inmates, so if one person tried to run away, 2 collars would explode. Yeah, it was crazy. But this is a whole different thing going on. We'll talk more about it later. But with seeing all this food, Mole Man is like, hey, what is this, a final meal before the hunt? And Kraven tells him yes, because there's no sport in hunting a starving animal. And right here where Mysterio asks, how are you gonna do it? Kraven tells them at first he thought about being a loyal soldier, because at first he was just gonna bring them in and have Peter and Harry fight to the death while the whole Sinister Six watched. So Harry tells him right here, we would never do that. And Kraven tells him that he agrees. And he tells him, especially once I learned one of you's a physical dynamo and the other's just a weak man in a suit, it didn't lend itself to the satisfaction I craved. So I dug a little deeper, looked for a more profound motivating factor. Truth serums and monogamy showed me the way. It woke the hunter in me. And that had Mole Man like, okay, so you know who they really are. And Kraven tells him, I figured out who the Goblin was before anyone else. The tracks were easy for a hunter of men to follow. He is Harry Osborn. If you don't know the name, I'm sure you know the company he owns, Oscorp. His only family is his wife, Gwen. And right here when Kraven starts talking about the family, I want you guys to notice something. Because right away, Harry's response is like, don't you even think about hurting her. But when Mole Man asks, who's this guy? And Kraven starts telling them everything about Peter. Peter does not say a word, and it is terrifying. Because with Kraven mentioning his wife Mary Jane and his kids Richard and May, there is nothing that Peter has to say here. And you can just tell by his demeanor that he wants to go off on this guy. And there's 2 other people in this room who noticed this in a little bit. Because from here Mysterio says there's nothing more tedious than believing that facts about a person reveal who they truly are. So Kraven's like, yeah, spoken like a true Mysterio. But I agree, that's the point of the hunt, to reveal the prey as they truly are. So right here, Harry's like, listen to me, you abducted us, drugged us, and tortured us. We're never gonna play your stupid game. So Kraven tells him, oh, but you will. You will run, and I will hunt. Because if you die, so does your family. But if you can kill me, then you and your loved ones are safe. And it's around this time where Harry just looks at Peter. Peter doesn't say anything, and Harry doesn't say anything to him. Harry just looks at him. And Harry sees that look on Peter's face, and that's when he tells Kraven, I've changed my mind. I will take that deal. So of course Kraven, he's happy to hear it, and after that he's like, shall we eat? But Harry's like, he doesn't want the food, he just wants to get on with it. And that's when Kraven looks to Peter, and he says, and you Peter, you have said nothing. Don't you have anything to say? And I tell you man, when Peter just looks up at him, and even still, without saying a word, right away Kraven sees it in Peter's eyes. Peter is ready to get to it, and Kraven knows that, he sees it. And that's when Kraven pushes a button under the table that sends Peter and Harry down into the Savage Land. And when I tell you the look of fear on Harry's face, he looking like, come on man, I ain't got no powers, dog. But quickly we find out that their chairs were set up with parachutes in order to give them a somewhat safe landing. So they end up getting caught in a tree for a minute, but Peter's able to break free and catch Harry before he lands on his neck. But the next thing they hear is their collars when they start beeping like crazy. And it's like they start from a slow beep and then they go really fast. But after that, nothing happens. They just fall off. And when Kraven radios them through the collar, only to tell them that last little touch was a joke and not to worry about the bombs because he's not going to rob himself of the pleasure of looking into their eyes and deep into their souls before he claims his prize. And Kraven goes on to let them know that they have 3 hours to prepare, and when time's up, he's coming for them. And he even goes on to tell them, oh, one last thing, you are in the Savage Land, and here it will not just be me who's hunting you, so please comrades, do try to stay alive. So it's here where Harry asks Peter like, okay, what's the plan? And Peter tells him when we were falling, I could pretty much see that we were going to land in the dead center of the jungle. I think our best bet is to head in a straight line, find the edge, and then figure out some way to the surface, which is a solid and efficient plan. But when Harry hears this, he grabs Peter and he's like, wait, what about Kraven? Because Peter's plan is basically for them to slip out without Kraven noticing. So Peter tells Harry here, we have to get home. I can't worry about anything but that right now. He knows about our families. And that's when Harry tells him that's why they need to end it here. Because if they can stop Kraven down here, like for good, then they won't have to worry about him coming after nobody. And right in the middle of this, Peter tells Harry to wait because his spider sense goes off and he sees a raptor tiptoeing behind Harry and looking at him like a snack. But when it leaps forward, Peter takes this thing head on. And to this raptor's surprise, this sneak attack quickly turns into a boxing match. And unfortunately, this raptor didn't bring any hands, because raptors don't have hands. But Peter basically just beats this thing until it's no longer moving. And it's got Harry like, man, I'm starting to feel a bit better about us getting out of here alive. But really quickly, and I can't put enough emphasis on this, but I want you guys to keep in mind everything that we're seeing from Peter, whether it was that chilling silence from earlier, when Kraven was threatening his family, or even in this moment where he's ready to kill this raptor to save his friend. These moments are giving us a glimpse into who Peter is, and a bit more of the darker side at that, if you will. But nonetheless, what's not being directly said or told here is the fact that his Pico suit, which is literally a replica of his psyche, it also carries all of these traits. But again, since we're dealing with an artificial intelligence, if that's even what it is in its entirety, there's no telling where, when, or how it will apply Peter's different behaviors. Like for example, this past Christmas, the Pico suit didn't say a word for nearly the whole night. And it's like, you can't tell me this thing couldn't pull off a Peter Parker impression if it wanted to. But instead it decided to stay silent for nearly that entire night. So yeah, there's that, and the suit bonding with Richard, no pun intended, in a similar way to how Peter bonded with May, keeping their little secret from the family. And it's like this suit is using Peter's traits, which for the most part has seemed harmless and innocent up to this point. But I mean, so has Peter. But we just don't know when or where the suit is going to decide to use Peter's traits, because if the suit feels like someone is a threat to Richard, it just might take over and not let up. But in the here and now, with Peter taking out this raptor, more of them come strolling in shortly after. So now Harry's only hope is for Peter to fight these things off, which is going to be real tricky, because if Peter at least had his web shooters, I'd be a little bit more confident about the odds. But nonetheless, these guys have got to figure it out. But meanwhile, when we head back over to Richard in the Pico suit, just after they've done a little bit of crime fighting, which I gotta say, in the bigger picture, with Peter missing and there still being a Spider-Man swinging around, this is probably gonna help minimize the suspicion for anyone else who was probably close to finding out his secret. But for Richard here, after doing a bit of crime fighting, he's a bit shaken up from it. So the suit tells him he did great, just take a deep breath. But at the same time, Richard's like, Mom and Dad would be so furious if they found out that I could have gotten hurt. But the suit just tells him it was a petty criminal, Richard. You were never in any real danger. And if you had frozen up or stumbled, I would have stepped in. And Richard's just like, okay, but Mom and Dad would still be mad. And the suit lets him know, probably, but they'll deal with that if it becomes a problem. And right here, while they're swinging through the city, minding their business, the two of them are cut out of the air mid-swing by the new Black Cat, who's stepping up to let Spider-Man know that she's replacing her father. But little did she know that this ain't even Spider-Man. But I think it definitely will be interesting to see how this interaction goes down between Walter Hardy's daughter and Peter Parker's son, because I'm sure she wants payback. But at the same time, I just hope the Pico suit doesn't see her as a threat or a raptor, because it's almost as if she's been out here hunting for Spider-Man. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.